My name is Leah Caldwell. I'm 29 years old. Last month, my parents stood in the middle of my brother's engagement party. 50 guests, grandparents, colleagues, the whole room holding champagne flutes. And my mother pointed at me and said, "Oh, and this is Leah. She handles logistics for us." Not my daughter. Not my youngest, handles logistics. Like I was the event coordinator they'd hired and forgotten to tip. I smiled. I always smile. I've been smiling through things like this for so long that sometimes I catch my reflection mid-grin and don't recognize myself. But here's what nobody in that room knew. 18 months earlier, I had quietly started building something. Something that had nothing to do with logistics, nothing to do with my family, nothing to do with the version of me they'd decided to see. And the night my mother introduced me as the help at my own brother's party, I realized I was finally ready to use it. Before I get to that, let me take you back. Because you need to understand the kind of house I grew up in to understand why it took me 29 years to stop disappearing. We lived in a split level in Naperville, Illinois. 4 bedrooms, finished basement. The kind of street where every lawn gets fertilized on the same weekend in April. My father, Raymond, worked in commercial real estate. My mother sent me a Fred when she called the household, which in practice meant organizing social commitments and reminding everyone else to do the actual work. My brother Trevor is 4 years older than me. He played lacrosse through high school, studied business at Northwestern, now works at a consulting firm downtown where his LinkedIn title takes up 2 lines. Trevor gets the big chair at holiday dinners. Trevor gets the "have you heard what he's doing?" phone call my parents make to relatives. Trevor's name comes up at church, at the neighborhood block party, at my parents' anniversary dinner in the way that communicates, "Look what we made." My name comes up differently. Leah can bring the food. Leah has a flexible schedule. Leah doesn't mind. I work as a freelance copywriter, remote mostly. I've been doing it since I was 24 after a marketing job in Chicago that didn't stick. My parents have never fully understood what I do. My mother once explained it to a neighbor as, "She writes things for the internet." The neighbor nodded politely and turned back to Trevor to ask about his latest project. I never corrected them. I just refilled the water glasses and went back to the kitchen. That's the thing about being the logistics one. You stop expecting to be seen. You start measuring your worth in tasks completed, in problems quietly solved before anyone notices there was a problem at all. My parents' anniversary dinner for 30 people. I built the menu, ordered the flowers, coordinated the parking situation with the neighbor 2 doors down who always blocks the driveway. Nobody thanked me. But the night went smoothly, so technically, I'd done my job. The breaking point doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in accumulated small moments, like water damage inside a wall. You don't see it until the ceiling caves. Mine arrived on a Tuesday evening 8 months before the engagement party. My brother had just called to tell me he was proposing to his girlfriend Amber in Scottsdale the following weekend. Could I fly in and help set up the surprise dinner? And could I maybe handle the coordination with the restaurant, the florist, the photographer he booked, and Amber's family who were flying in from Phoenix? He'd Venmo me something for my time. He sent me $40. I spent 11 hours across 2 days coordinating that proposal dinner. I drafted the timeline, translated it into a shared document for 5 different parties, confirmed allergies, handled the florist miscommunication at 11 p.m. the night before, and drove Trevor and Amber to the restaurant so they could arrive exactly when the photographer was positioned. The photos turned out beautifully. Trevor looked effortlessly happy in every single one of them. I'm not in any of the photos. After they left for their celebration dinner, which I was not invited to, I sat in the rental car in the Scottsdale restaurant parking lot and stared at the $40 Venmo notification on my phone. And something about that specific amount, not nothing, not a real sum, but $40, cracked something open in me. I had a client call the following Monday. A woman named, and I'm using her real name because she's the reason any of this happened, Diane. She runs a small publishing company in Portland, and she'd hired me 6 months earlier to write web copy. Somewhere in that work, I'd told her I used to write poetry in college, and she'd asked to see some of it. I'd almost said no. I almost said, "Oh, it's nothing. It's old stuff." But I'd sent it, and on that Monday call, Diane said something that I've replayed maybe 300 times since. She said, "Leah, you have a way of writing about invisible things that makes them impossible to ignore. Have you thought about writing essays?" I hadn't. I mean, I'd thought about it the way you think about things that aren't for people like you. Vaguely, distantly, like looking at a house you assume you could never afford. But after the parking lot in Scottsdale, after $40, after 11 hours, I went home, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not for a client. Not for anyone. Just writing. I called the first one The Logistics Girl. It was about growing up in a family where one child carries the invisible weight while another carries the name. I posted it on a Substack account I created at 1 a.m. with a username that wasn't my name. I told no one. That's where I'll pause for a second, because I want to ask you something. Have you ever built something in secret because you weren't sure the people around you deserved to see it yet? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know where you're watching from and what that felt like. Now let me tell you what happened at the engagement party. Trevor and Amber set the date for a June engagement party, my parents' backyard, string lights, catered appetizers, the good wine glasses from the cabinet my mother only opens for important occasions. 70 guests. My mother called me in April to go over the details. The details turned out to be, could I manage the catering coordination, the rental chairs, the sound system rental for the toast, and the dietary restriction spreadsheet for 70 people? And could I also make sure the backyard flowers were refreshed the morning of because the usual gardener was on vacation? Sure, I said. Of course, I want you to notice that I said yes. This is important, because some of you reading this are already thinking, why didn't she just say no? And the honest answer is that I'd been saying yes for so long that no felt like a foreign word in my mouth. Like trying to speak a language you studied once and then abandoned. You know the shape of it. You can't quite make the sound. But I was also, by then, 18 months into my Substack. The Logistics Girl had found its audience. Quietly, slowly, the way things grow when nobody's performing for metrics. 2,000 subscribers. Then 5. Then, in February, when an essay I wrote about attending your siblings' milestones while your own go unnoticed got shared by a newsletter with a larger following. 11,000. 11,000 people who opened their email on a Tuesday morning to read something I wrote at midnight after crying in my car. My family had no idea. I still drove to Naperville every weekend when something needed to be done. I still picked up my mother's dry cleaning when she mentioned it twice in a phone call. I still knew the name of every vendor at my brother's engagement party and had their numbers saved in my phone. But I was also writing. And people were reading, and something in me had started to shift. Not loudly, not yet, but underneath, the way tectonic plates move before anyone feels the ground change. The engagement party was on a Saturday. I arrived at 8 a.m., 6 hours before guests. I set up the chair arrangement in the backyard, confirmed delivery times with the catering company, replaced the flower arrangements in 3 clay pots along the fence, ran to the store when my mother realized she'd forgotten cocktail napkins, and was in the middle of helping the sound guy run cables when my mother called from upstairs. "Leah, can you steam Trevor's linen shirt?" The steamer's in the hall closet. I steamed the shirt. I changed into my dress in the downstairs bathroom at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before guests arrived. I bought it 3 months earlier. A deep rust color. I thought it was nice when I bought it. Standing in the bathroom mirror, I thought it looked fine. Just fine. Guests arrived at 2. My mother floated through them in a cream-wrap dress, receiving congratulations like she was being thanked for Trevor's existence, which in her mind, I think she was. Trevor and Amber stood at the center of every conversation. Amber is warm and genuinely lovely. I want to be clear about that. She's not the villain of this story. She squeezed my arm when she saw me and said, "Leah, seriously, this looks incredible. Did you do all of this?" And I said yes, and she said, "You're amazing." And then someone pulled her away and that was the end of that. My mother introduced me to 3 different people over the course of the afternoon. To a woman from her book club, "This is my daughter Leah. She helped put all of this together." To my father's former colleague, "Oh, this is Leah. She handles things for us." To Trevor's college roommate and his wife, "This is Trevor's sister. She's great at organizing. She's great at organizing. She's great at organizing." I was standing near the appetizer table when I heard it. Trevor's roommate, being polite, said, "Oh, cool, what do you do?" And before I could answer, my mother, who was 3 feet away and somehow always within earshot of a moment like this, said, "She does freelance work. Writing, I think. It's flexible, which is nice for helping out." The roommate nodded. His wife smiled. They moved on. I took a bruschetta off the tray I had ordered and arranged, and I ate it standing next to the folding table I had rented. And I thought, okay, something has to change. But it was what happened at 4 p.m. that made the change non-negotiable. Trevor's toast. My father said a few words. Amber's father said a few words. Then my mother stood up and gave a toast that I have to give her credit for. It was well organized, emotionally calibrated, and landed every beat it was supposed to land. She talked about Trevor's work ethic, his warmth, his ability to build a life worth admiring. She talked about how proud the family was. She got a little misty at the end, people clapped. Then my father added offhand into the microphone. And of course, none of this would have looked this beautiful without. And I felt something lift in my chest. Some small, hopeful thing. He pointed at the catering company's display table. The wonderful team from Silver Fork. Really excellent work. Applause for the caterers. I had ordered Silver Fork. I had negotiated the menu. I had confirmed the head count 3 times. The caterers did excellent work. They also got thanked by name at a microphone. I did not. I went inside under the pretense of checking on something in the kitchen. I stood at the sink and looked out the window at my family in the backyard, my mother touching people's arms, my brother laughing, Amber radiant, my father refilling glasses, all of it beautiful, all of it assembled by my hands, none of it including me as a person, only as a function. I pulled out my phone. I opened my Substack dashboard. 14,212 subscribers. An email from an editor at a digital publication I respected, sent 2 hours earlier asking if I'd be interested in discussing a regular column. I hadn't seen it until right now. I typed back, "Yes, I'd love to talk. When are you available this week?" Then I went back outside and finished the party. 2 weeks after the engagement party, my mother called to talk about Thanksgiving, which was 4 months away. But apparently the window for securing a turducken was closing. Did I have time to reach out to the farm she'd used last year? And could I also start thinking about the seating chart? Because Grandma Elaine and Aunt Phyllis could not be within 3 seats of each other? I said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." She said, "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something." I said, "I've been writing a newsletter for the past year and a half. 14,000 people subscribe to it. An editor has asked me to write a column. I'm going to start saying no to things that take time I need for my own work." Silence. Then, a newsletter. Like emails. Like essays, personal essays. About my experience. Longer silence. What kind of experience? My life, my family, how I've been showing up for everyone and no one's noticed. The silence after that was different. Heavier. "Leah," she finally said, "I hope you're not writing about us." I told her some of it was about the family dynamic. I told her I hadn't used real names. I told her this wasn't an attack, it was my story, and I'd been waiting a long time to tell it. She told me I was being dramatic. She told me Trevor had a demanding career and a wedding to plan, and I had more flexibility. She told me family supported each other. She said she'd talk to me when I was thinking more clearly. She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand and thought about 11,000 people opening their emails to read something I'd written at midnight, and I thought about $40 in a parking lot in Scottsdale, and I thought about the caterers getting thanked by name at the microphone, Then I called the editor back and scheduled the meeting for Thursday. I need to stop here for a second because I know some of you are thinking, why didn't she say something sooner? Why didn't she tell them about the newsletter when she started it? And I want to answer that honestly. Because I needed it to be mine first. When you've spent your whole life being useful to other people, building something for yourself feels dangerous. Like if you say it out loud before it's real, before it's solid, someone will dismiss it or diminish it or ask you to table it because the turducken window is closing. I needed to know it was real before I let anyone near it. Now it was real. The column launched 6 weeks later. The editor, a woman named Liz, with excellent editorial instincts and a very direct email style, gave me the title, The Invisible Work. Bi-weekly essays about the labor that goes unseen, the family dynamics that produce one shining child and one capable shadow, the slow work of deciding you deserve more than you've been given. The first column went live on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, it had been shared widely enough that a publicist at a small press reached out asking if I'd considered writing a book. I had not. But I considered it then. My brother found the column before my parents did. He texted me on Saturday. "Is this about us?" I replied. "It's about my experience in our family, yes." He sent back, "Leah, Mom is going to freak out." I replied, "I know." He didn't text again for 2 weeks. When he did, it was shorter than I expected. For what it's worth, I didn't know you felt this way. I guess I didn't ask. That's all. But I kept it. My mother called on Sunday, 4 days after the column launched. I answered because I'd decided I was done letting things go to voicemail. She said, "I read it." I said, "Okay." She said, "You made me sound terrible." I said, "I wrote about how I felt. I didn't editorialize your character." She said, "You didn't have to. The whole thing does it for you." And then she said something that surprised me. She went quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was different. Not soft exactly, but stripped of its usual management. "Did you really feel like I didn't see you?" I said. "Mom, you introduced me to 3 people at the party as she helps out." Another silence. "I didn't realize I was doing that." "I know you didn't. That's almost the whole point. We didn't resolve anything that day. We're not a family that resolves things in one conversation. But something shifted, the way a window unsticks after years of swelling. You push it and suddenly there's air. I don't know yet what we'll build in that air. But it's there. The column has been running for 3 months. The book conversation is ongoing, early stages, nothing signed. But the conversation is happening. My mother has stopped calling me to handle logistics without asking first. Last month, she called about Easter and said, "I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to help with the food, and I completely understand if you're too busy with your work." I almost dropped the phone. I did help with the food. But it felt different, doing it by choice. My brother and I have been texting more. Not deeply yet. Not the way you text someone you fully trust. But more than before. He asked me last week what my newsletter was actually about, and I sent him the first essay, The Logistics Girl, and he read it and sent back a voice memo instead of a text, which is how I knew it had landed somewhere real. He said, "I think I had no idea what it cost you, and I think I just assumed you were okay because you always seemed okay." He paused in the recording. "I'm sorry I didn't ask." I've listened to that voice memo 4 times. I'm not going to wrap this up with a bow. I'm still figuring out what my family looks like now that I've stopped being only useful. I'm still learning how to say no without my heart racing. I still have weeks where the old patterns pull at me, where someone needs something, and my first instinct is to drop whatever I'm doing and go provide it. But I also have 14,000 people who read what I write, and a column at a publication I used to read on my lunch break, and a book conversation that's slowly becoming real. And a desk in the second bedroom of my apartment that I've painted the same rust color as the dress I wore to the engagement party, because I liked that color. Because I deserve a room I chose. And I have this. Last Tuesday, my mother called just to talk. Not to ask me anything, not to coordinate anything, just to talk. We spoke for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. A book she was reading. a neighbor's new dog, something funny she'd seen on the news. At the end, she said, "I'm proud of you, you know." The writing. A pause. I should have said that sooner. I said, "Yeah, you should have." But I also said thank you, because it turns out you can hold both things, the grief of what took so long and the gratitude that it arrived at all. There's a term in psychology for what I was doing all those years. Emotional parentification. When one child in a family takes on the emotional and logistical labor that keeps everyone else comfortable, while their own needs go unvoiced and unmet. I didn't know the term when I was living it. I just knew that I had my brother's vendor contact saved in my phone, and I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me what I was working on. Here's what I want you to take from this. If you're in a family where your name means she handles things, your competence is not your sentence. The fact that you're good at holding things together does not mean you're obligated to do it forever, for free, without credit, without rest. The people who truly see you won't only call when something needs managing. And if the people in your life have only ever needed you, not wanted you, that's information. You're allowed to do something with it. You are not logistics. You are a person. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do is sit down at a desk in a room you painted yourself, open a document that belongs entirely to you, and start writing down what it actually cost. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet way you start to see patterns once you stepped far enough back to actually look at them. For years I was available. That was the cause. The effect was that people scheduled their lives around my availability without ever asking if I had one of my own. I showed up, so they assumed I would always show up. I handled things, so they forgot that handling things cost something. Not money. Though $40 in a Scottsdale parking lot was its own kind of message. But time, attention, the particular kind of energy you spend when you're managing other people's lives instead of building your own. The thing I've had to sit with is this. I was not a passive victim of that dynamic. I participated in it. Every time I said yes when I meant no, every time I swallowed the thing I actually wanted to say and replaced it with, "Of course, I'll take care of it," I was teaching the people around me exactly how to treat me. That's not self-blame. That's just honesty. And I think there's a difference between blaming yourself and understanding your own role, because one of them keeps you stuck, and the other one sets you free. What changed for me wasn't a single confrontation. It wasn't the moment my father thanked Silver Fork at the microphone. It was the 18 months I spent writing in secret, building something that belonged only to me, before I said a word about it to anyone. That period taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. That I was capable of sustained effort towards something I cared about, not because someone needed me to be, but because I chose to be. That's a different kind of muscle. It takes longer to build, but once you have it, no one can take it from you. My mother didn't mean to disappear me. I genuinely believe that. She was operating on a set of assumptions she'd never examined. Chief among them being that capable people don't need to be asked how they're doing. They just keep being capable. The cost of that assumption was 29 years of me standing next to folding tables I rented, eating bruschetta I ordered, watching my own contributions vanish into the general success of an event that bore someone else's name. But here's the thing about cause and effect. It runs both ways. When I stopped being infinitely available, something had to change. When I started writing down what it actually cost, something shifted. Not immediately, not cleanly, but genuinely. My mother asking if I was willing to help instead of assuming I would. That's a small thing. To someone who's never been in that dynamic, it probably sounds like nothing. To me, it sounded like someone finally learning to knock before entering a room they'd always walked into without a second thought. Integrity, I think, is doing the hard thing even when it would be easier to keep disappearing. For me, the hard thing wasn't confrontation. I'm not wired for grand scenes. The hard thing was continuing to show up for myself on the days when the pull to go back to being useful, to being needed, was stronger than my own sense of what I deserved. Intelligence isn't just knowing what's wrong. It's having the presence of mind to see your own patterns clearly enough to interrupt them. And resilience isn't getting through things without feeling them. It's feeling them fully, sitting with the grief of what took too long, and choosing to build something anyway. Leah Caldwell is not a cautionary tale. She's just someone who got tired of being thanked by implication and decided to be thanked by name. That's all any of us are really asking for. To be seen as a person, not a function. To have our names said out loud, in a room full of people, and mean something more than she handles things. That starts with saying it to yourself first. Even if no one's listening yet, especially then.